And here we are coming back from spring break, and I'll go ahead and go to our course page. And I went to the assignments folder, and the assignments folder lists a midterm examination, and I can see that people are doing their journal assignments. That's good. And there's the midterm examination, and I'll go ahead and click on that. And obviously, it's not due yet. It is due on March 31st, which would be next Tuesday. Yes, next Tuesday. And I would suggest, as you do this, that maybe you go ahead and take a look at the questions, prepare your answers on a document of your own, and then copy and paste the answer to each question into the appropriate space. What that does is it gives you the opportunity to not be under pressure of whether the site goes down or whatever. You know, you'll still have your answer prepared over here, and then you can copy that answer and then paste it into the appropriate space. Now, you might feel comfortable just going ahead and answering it. So if you did, then, you know, you'd be doing it streaming, so to speak. I mean, the assessment would be open as an assessment, and then you'd find your answer, and while that's open, you put it in there, and that's fine. But if I had to do this, I would look at these questions, and I would take each one and answer it on a separate document, a Word document, so to speak, and then copy and paste it.
So, okay, if we open and close and then go back to it, it will be okay. So
that's my understanding, yes. I think you could.
We can do it on other pads.
Oh, and then you'll be able to keep doing it that way. That's good. I'm glad. Another class I teach, it is a challenge, at another school, it's a challenge. Once you open an assessment, if you close it, you know, it might be difficult to get back in. But if you've been able to do that here, then with Populi, then that's a benefit.
To do it with other tests. I mean, we did it with the letters.
Very good.
So I could take two parts today and parts tomorrow.
Oh, that's very good. And that's a benefit.
I don't know if this is set up by the teacher that way or.
Well, this is the same.
It's the same for every.
Yeah. See, this is this Populi format. That should work.
You can try right now. If I open it and close.
Okay.
Will I be able to? Because then you can just resend it to me, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good design feature. Populi has been well conceived. I like it. I know two other course management systems. One's Blackboard, the other one's Canvas. And there are times when it's difficult once a student opens an assessment. If something happens partway through there, they might be afraid they would lose what they'd already done.
Okay.
But that may not be the case here with Populi, and if so, then that's simpler. That's good. So the midterm examination is due by the end of day next Tuesday. I discovered that from Pastor Darrow that there will be no class next Wednesday, which is the day before Ascension Convention begins. So we still have some work to do. You'll have an assignment, but I want to tell you we won't be in class next Wednesday. We'll be in class tomorrow, of course. And there's the midterm examination. So I wanted to kind of, what shall I say, not summarize, but discuss where we've gotten so far. We have gone through commandments. And let's go to Exodus chapter 20 and take a look at that. So I'll pull it up on my screen, Exodus chapter 20. And this, of course, is our approach in understanding God's Word by looking at the Ten Commandments and using them as a framework. So there you have them up on the screen. The first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Second one, don't make carved images. Third one, don't take God's name in vain. Fourth one, honor your father and your mother. We've definitely discussed those. And I think
we are able to go back.
That's good.
So we can take it in.
Okay, great. And then we've not yet done the commandment on thou shalt not murder, or you shall not commit adultery, or you shall not steal. We have done the ninth commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And that's when we talked in length about lying. And we have done the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, and so forth. So what we have left here in the second portion of our course since the midterm is a discussion of all the ethics involved with the prohibition against murdering, the prohibition against committing adultery, and the prohibition against stealing. And it's very interesting the way that Grudem unpacks these, because inside these prohibitions is a whole host of values that will help us to understand our morals in a broader sense. So what's left to be done here is this week we're looking at capital punishment, war, and self-defense. That's really a lot. I don't know if we're going to get all the way. We won't do justice to it. And then in the next section, we'll briefly touch on a few of these ethical issues, such as abortion, euthanasia, and suicide. You can see that a whole lot is packed into this one right here. The value of human life. Hence, don't murder. But if indeed that's important enough for God to hold us accountable to it, then all the things that comprise human life are going to be important. And that's why he puts these other issues up here. I've chosen to use Grudem as a text for our class, partly because I love his Ten Commandments approach. I love the fact that I don't have to spend time talking about other ways of looking at morality besides God's commandments. Other texts, however, spend a good deal of time looking at these big issues. So I hope you're not disappointed if we don't spend a lot of time on the big issues. We're going to spend some time on them. One of the things we've discovered about ethics over the years is that we may have strong opinions about something like euthanasia or infanticide and so forth. However, the likelihood of us having to decide for or against that during our lives is not very high. It's good as Christians to have strong positions, but it's more likely that we're going to have to do everyday ethics. Should I steal? Should I lie? Should I cheat? Should I gossip? Those are everyday ethics issues. And Christians, as we encounter people with the need to show why Jesus saves, obviously that begs the question, well, what does he save you from? And one of the things God says is, I save you from your sin and the penalty of sin. Well, what is sin? And now then we can talk easily about, hey, have you been lying? Have you been gossiping? Have you been stealing? Have you been cheating? There's those everyday life issues. Now, what's left in our approach is protecting marriage and protecting property. So that will happen during this next month, but we're going to have some interruptions. We'll have an interruption next week in terms of our course, and that we won't be meeting. Now, what you get out of a course is far more than what a professor can talk about in a class. I know from my college classes that I do remember a lot of what professors talked about. And they charged me to do all the reading and to benefit on my own studies. And I have benefited from that. That's part of the reason why I love teaching this. These things, we're just touching on them. We're getting you, pushing you along in considering these questions over your life. The class won't end when we get to the end of the semester because you'll keep on testing, you'll keep on checking. But that's where we're headed. So I just wanted to briefly mention that. We will be taking a look at Part 5, protecting marriage and protecting property. Now, I don't know how many of these chapters. I won't be able to afford to assign all of these. And I may just really be praying. And if you have some suggestions about which chapters you think would be best, I'm open to those. You'll let me know pretty soon because I've got to get it planned out, the rest of it. I have material on all kinds of topics. I've been teaching ethics for years, so I think it's going to be not hard for me to put together a framework. But time is of the essence. It's important to know what it is we can actually accomplish. So we'll be trying to do that. I see that it's broadcasting my movie screen there, so that's kind of boring. Let's go to the topic in hand, and that is protecting human life. And I've posted some new things here. Should any person die for a crime she committed? That's the issue of, or he committed, the issue of capital punishment. And I've also posted something on just war. Now, that just is an adjective here, not an adverb. So how is war ever conducted in a righteous way? And that's the question we'll be looking at. And those two questions will kind of dominate what it is we're doing. But there's something beneath that. And the fact that capital punishment is an action which ends the life of a human, and war is an action that ends the life of a human, or at least sidelines that person. So when they look at wars and they talk about casualties, that's how many soldiers did you take off the battlefield? Amongst those taken off the battlefield are those that are injured and those that are killed. So it's definitely an assault on human life. And that's why protecting human life is our main umbrella concept. But behind that is that why is life important to be protected? If we're evolutionists, by the way, this is one of the drawbacks of evolution. We're just accidental collocations of atoms. In fact, there was a great philosopher who said that. and that leads to despair. Why should I think that human collocations of atoms are any different than earthworm collocations of atoms, or mushroom collocations of atoms, or table collocations of atoms? And if you look at it from a purely materialistic standpoint, you need to do some work to point out why human life is important in the grand scheme of things, unless you have a God who tells you up front, before you even step on the earth, Genesis chapter 1. So please turn there with me. Genesis chapter 1. And we're going to see a very interesting concept. Not Genesis, Genesis. Type that right. And we know Genesis 1 is all about the creation. But look as we get down here to the end of it. Verse 26. God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit conducting conversation. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Boy, that's interesting. After our likeness. Well, what have you been doing, God? Well, he's making a whole lot of other things, and they have his fingerprints on them. I watch my cats, and they love to get into the sunbeam, especially on a cold winter day. Yeah, I got 2 cats. and they love to get in the sunbeam. They have a nature. Their nature is find warmth. They'll find the warmest place in a house, and if that happens to be your lap, then that's where they will be. They know when it's mealtime. They're very reliable. About 5:30, you're going to see some commotion if we haven't gone out and stood over their bowls and put food in them, because they will be standing over their bowls. And if you're not there, they'll come back and get you. We don't. Cats have a particular nature. So what's the difference between cat nature and human nature? That's an essential question. The materialist amongst us who says, hey, all that really matters is, what we see, what we taste, touch, and feel. That's all I think is real. And everything's made of atoms and so forth. They have a really hard time explaining why we should care about human atoms over against other kinds of atoms. I mean, they're all the same periodic table, right? Where there are like 104 naturally occurring elements. Is there something special about my sodium over the sodium of a blade of grass? I don't think so. It's the same sodium. Is there something special about the oxygen I'm breathing over against the oxygen that the trees are transpiring? I don't think so. It's the same oxygen. But God says there's something special about you. And it is that we're created in His likeness. Let them have dominion. Oh, He doesn't give dominion, that is, mastery or control. He doesn't give that to every other type of creature, even though there's some that are far bigger and far stronger. You guys ever been to Lincoln Park Zoo and watched the gorillas? I mean, they're just massive. They're incredible. Or the chimpanzees. And I found from, obviously watching nature videos and so forth, that chimpanzees are pretty tough characters. They might be fun to have as a little child, as a little baby chimpanzee. But as they grow up, they become stronger, and their territorial drives become very aggressive. And in the wild, about 1/3 of chimpanzees die from basically gang warfare. They're strong enough to rip your arm off. Their upper body is far stronger than the average human being. So why didn't He say that to them? Or to whales, or to dolphins, or to other, what are some other really smart creatures?
Octopus.
Which ones?
Octopus.
Yeah, the octopus has a special kind of intellect, yeah? Mm-hmm. I mean, why did He say that to them? There's something special about being a human. He chose, it was His choice, that at the end of all His creation, He creates beings that He can say, we're making these ones after our likeness. And if we think likeness and image are two different things, they're not. They're really the same thing. It's just two different ways of saying the same thing. He creates us after His likeness, and then it says, obviously this steps back. This is first person God talking now. There's somebody who is speaking under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, but kind of summarizing what God has done. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. It's so important, it gets repeated. Male and female, He created them. All right. So this image, in Latin, it's called imago Dei, the image of God. And it's at the base of the commandments to protect human life. If this wasn't true, it'd be hard to make the case. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, people try to make the case for the wrongfulness of murder, I should say, without reference to God. But it lacks a firm reference point. And I've tried to demonstrate one of the reasons why it doesn't work. What do we say that we're the most important species? In fact, there's even been somebody who used the phrase speciesist against humans, thinking that they're the most important species. All right. I'm not going to try to get proud about this, but I'm not going to deny what God said. He clearly said, He created me in His image, you in His image. That's an amazing thing. Now, does God have 2 arms, 2 legs, and hair falling out? No. What his image means is something deeper than that. And so this is something for you to ponder and to understand. But as you go forward in your Christian life and you try to explain to people why humans are special, why they're important, why God has expectations that are different of us than they are of all the other rest of creation, find ways to talk about the image of God. Because if you do this well, guess what? You've got a firm basis for talking against prejudice, a firm basis for talking against abortion, a firm basis for talking against gender confusion. It's right here. And as you go forward, this will be helpful for you. So I'm giving you a concept showing you this is beneath, in a way, it undergirds our concern that we ought not to murder. As we look at Grudem's text, we'll go back here to the capital punishment text. There we go, chapter 18, which I assigned 18, 19, and 20 for this week. We see that it isn't don't kill. Now, this is a massive mistake in our culture, even amongst religious people. And they'll show up in prisons before an execution, and they'll be carrying around these banners that say, "Thou shalt not kill." And that's not what the Bible says. There are death penalties prescribed for offenses after Moses says this. Does God contradict himself? Wait, you said don't kill, but then you say kill for this. Well, that's because he didn't say don't kill. He said, you shall not murder. That's an important distinction. And this meaning of murder is the unlawful taking of a human life. It's not the ordinary word for judicial execution. There's another word for that. It's also not the ordinary word used for killing in war. So the prohibition is against a certain type of ending of human life, and that is murder. Keep that straight. See, a lot of our questions in ethics get solved when we do a good job defining the terms. And that's one of the reasons why I've chosen Grudem, because he writes good definitions. As a teacher, you're going to find a big part of your job is going to be helping people learn how to define things. Because otherwise, what are they going to say in today's postmodern culture? Which I don't endorse postmodernism, but they're going to say, well, it all depends on, and then they really won't tell you, well, how do you define murder? Okay, here's how you define murder. Now we got that problem solved, don't we? The sixth commandment should not be used as an argument against capital punishment. That's not the sense in which the original readers would have understood it. But boy, are there a lot of Christians who've written books, such as David Gushee and Jim Wallace, and they haven't carefully looked at these definitions, and they end up being used by Christians to defend positions that aren't in the Bible. That's unfortunate, isn't it? Now, I won't spend much time on this because you guys have already studied it, but when we look at the Torah, that is the 5 books of Moses, and by the way, there's very few laws in the first book, Genesis. Mostly it's long narrative, isn't it? It goes from Adam to Noah to Abraham, ends with Joseph, mostly narrative. And the first part of Exodus is Israel getting delivered out of Egypt, narrative, story. It isn't until we get to Exodus 20 we start getting laws, per se. We go to Leviticus, mostly that's laws, but there's still some narrative there. Get to Numbers, there's definitely a lot of story there. And it isn't until we get to Deuteronomy that most of it is a reiteration of laws. So when we talk about Torah being law, it's in the context of the narratives of Israel, the history of Israel. And that's an important thing when we try to understand Scripture. But this commandment is acted on in the time of Moses in specific ways. There are some things that the death penalty is prescribed for that we're not going to apply today. So I would be a dead man because as a young teenager, I think I cursed my mom or my dad more than once. If not openly, I did it in my mind, but I think I did it at least once. And the Bible says you're supposed to kill a child that curses his mother or his father. I would be a dead man for sexual sin prior to becoming a Christian. You're supposed to stone those caught in adultery. I don't know that I actually ever bowed down to any image, but I certainly worshiped rock music, and you're supposed to stone an idolater. That's what the Torah says. Now, you already know why we don't apply those things today, and we don't try to construct a government that makes those things as laws. So we're standing against those that want to institute an Old Testament Israel-type government. That was for God's purposes in that day and time. It's not to be ignored. It's also not to be copied. It was for that time. That doesn't mean the laws aren't important, the principles are important, but the penalties are not endorsed to be reinforced in a modern civil government all the way. We have to use some judgment here, but that gets us to one of our main passages about capital punishment. And it's actually at the base of our understanding of all government. And I want you to be really clear on this one. Let's look at Genesis chapter 9. Now, by the way, when does Genesis chapter 9 happen? After the flood. So they're getting ready to reinstitute a human habitation of dry ground. They can't get out of the ark until they're sure there's dry ground. And they send this bird out, and they send it back, and it comes back, and finally they determine it's safe to get out of the ark. But before you get out of the ark, as you're unloading the ark, let's just put ourselves there. What must it have been like for Noah and his 3 sons and their collective wives? I mean, the total wives, 4 wives. Noah's wife, Shem's wife, Ham's wife, and Japheth's wife. Those 8 people. What must it have been like as they opened up the door to the ark and looked out on the dry ground that the ark is finally resting on? Which means it's probably a box, by the way. Ark means box, not boat. So it's laying flat. It didn't have to go anywhere, right? All it had to do was float. So what must it have been like as the ark is settled into this moist ground that was totally flooded by the flood? Can you put yourself there?
Yeah, like what do we do now?
What do we do now?
Where do we go?
Where do we go? I don't recognize anything. This is a 371-day event, not just 40 days. Everything's gone. There's all signs of human establishment gone. And they've got to go out and repopulate the earth. And it's a radically different environment. It's shocking. And so, we're going out into an environment in which animals are going to be competing with one another for food. There's not big, lush forests. They've all been flooded. They've all been taken off. Do you ever wonder how it is we can be getting oil from the Arctic regions and from desert regions? There's nothing growing in Saudi Arabia. Why do they have so much oil? There's nothing growing up in Alaska. Why is there so much oil? Or say Russia has more oil than anybody. Why is there so much oil up there when their growth season is about 6 weeks? And it's because the earth was different before the flood, because oil is basically dead plants and animals, compacted, compressed. Why? Well, it's because now there's nothing as they get off the ark, looking around. How's everything going to survive? I think they got fed while they were on the ark, or at least they hibernated or something like that. But as the animals come off, they're going to be competing. As humans come off, they're going to be trying to get their tummies full. What are you going to eat? You better not eat the things that were on the ark. Then they'll be totally extinct. So it's going to be tough. And so it's going to be barbaric. If there was ever a time in human history in which caveman-like existence took place, that's where it was. Not in the Garden of Eden. Not following the Garden of Eden. Look how long Adam and Eve lived. 930 years. It's like, this is not caveman existence. You don't live that long if you're a caveman. But here, it's going to be tough. So I wanted to set the stage to get us mentally in that place. And here's what God says. You can have things to eat now. Just as I gave you green plants before, now I give you everything. You can eat whatever you want. And you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. So you're not drinking blood. And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning from every beast. And from his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. You see, here, don't we see? God is saying you're accountable for one another. You take care of one another. Isn't that what a reckoning would be? If you got in a car and you ended up, running into somebody's fence and taking it down, the police showed up, they're going to take notes, they're going to take names, they're going to look at your license. They're going to require a reckoning for the damage. So there's a reckoning as an accountability thing, isn't it? To reckon. Every month, if you've got a checking account, you're going to have to be reconciled. You have to see to make sure that you agree with what the bank says you have left in your account. That's a reckoning. You go to jury trial. Someone holds you guilty of an offense. I once got nabbed for walking across a railroad crossing, right down by the train station. So stupid. Everybody was waiting. I couldn't figure it out. They're all waiting. They're smart. I'm not. I'm wearing a red jacket and a yellow Oregon hat, and I proudly walk across four lines of railroad track. And on the other side, a couple people in black uniforms came up and said, "Will you please step this way over to the van?" And he said, "You see that sign there? Do you see these lights blinking? Do you know somebody got killed here just last week?" "Oh, yeah, but I didn't see any train coming." He said, "That doesn't matter. This is dangerous and you violated the law." And I had to go to court. And I'll never forget, for a while after that, the number 4 was not my favorite number because I ended up getting fined $444 for what I did. And then they said you have to have community service for this. I had to be, give a reckoning for my actions. So here we've got a reckoning for the life of man. Specifically, if you shed the blood of man, and Grudem points out that means kill him, by man shall your blood be shed. Why? Because God made man in his own image. So the very basis for capital punishment is linked to this image of God. So what happens when we sin? In some sense, we're sinning against God in any one of these commands, but this is perhaps the most direct violation of God. In one sense, you kill another image bearer? You expect to be held guiltless? You expect your excuse to stand? No, it's not going to work. You shed the blood And that's a guilty murderous killing of another person. It's an idiom for if you murder, then you shall be executed. And it's going to happen not under God's direct lightning bolt or plague or opening up the earth type of judgment. It's going to be done by human government. By man shall your blood be shed. Now, in the prior chapter about civil government, it points out if God institutes government for the purpose of executing murderers, and that kind of authority is given by God to human beings, then all other authority and permission beneath that is also granted to human governments for all offenses. Because if you're going to make somebody have enough authority to round up a murderer, hold him on trial, prove him to be guilty, and then kill him, then shouldn't you also be authorized to handle when somebody kills another person's animal or steals from their property or lies to them or creates havoc? Those are lesser sins. If you're authorized to take care of this big sin, this big crime, then everything else less than that you're also authorized to deal with as a civil government. And that's what came in that prior chapter, which was kind of neat, I think. It's like, boy, good point here. If you're going to give somebody the ability to take life judiciously, then you're also going to give them the ability to fine and to imprison for lesser offenses. Is that clear? That's kind of cool. In this one verse here, you have a justification for civil government. And certainly, with regards to our problem of, hey, should government ever be allowed to kill anybody? We have some authorization here. Now, I want you to be aware, when did this take place? Right after Noah. Moses hasn't even shown up yet. He's not going to be around for quite a long time. So this isn't part of the Torah, the laws of Israel. It is part of the Torah and the 5 books, but it's not part of the laws that Jesus says, I've come not to abolish but to fulfill them. It's a principle that is there as we repopulate the earth. It's pretty primal. It's pretty basic. And that's important. That insight on his part is profound. So I posted something for you here on the Blackboard or the Populi site, and let's see if we can take a look at it. I'm going to go to PowerPoint, which will take over our screen for a while. Should any person be executed for a crime that he or she committed? Now, let's take a look. Because what Grudem doesn't list, but I have, is executions in the Bible. I thought, okay, maybe we should get some examples. So I put that in here. Now let's get rid of our CC. We don't need that. But Leviticus 24 is one of the places describing an execution in the Bible. And we're going to skip verification, and we'll see if that gets, and it doesn't. Let's see here. Excuse me. Blackboard or PowerPoint takes over your screen, and that's disturbing. But I haven't figured out how to fix that. Leviticus 24 then says, an Israelite woman's son fought in the camp with another man, and this son blasphemes the name and cursed. Now, verse 23, which you can follow along in your own Bibles if you like, but Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and they brought out of the camp the one who had cursed, and they stoned him with stones. The verses in between tell us why they did that, but they were given command by God. Let him be stoned, and so there's an execution. Now, I want, as I'm looking at examples here, I want to distinguish between a civil execution and the ending of a life on a battlefield as part of war. Because we're going to be looking at war in our next class. Here we're looking at capital punishment when the government decides to move and enforce a law in a civil, non-battle setting. And so we look at Numbers chapter 15. And guess what? Not long after they get the 10 Commandments, in which they're told to not do labor on the Sabbath, there's someone out there gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. Verse 32 of Numbers 15. And they found him gathering sticks, and they brought him to Moses and Aaron, the judges. What are you going to do about this? By the way, it says they found him gathering sticks, brought him to Moses and Aaron, and to all the congregation. Now, who is the congregation? It's probably the elders. It's probably leaders from each of the 12 tribes. You know, they're not getting 3 million people together to hear this. It's leaders. But they're trying to figure out, what are we going to do about this guy who's been gathering sticks on the Sabbath? He's not supposed to do it. They put him in custody. They tried to be sure they knew what to do. And the Lord said to Moses, this man shall be put to death. So they do it. They take him outside the camp and they stone him to death with sins. Verse 36. Another example of an execution is in Joshua. You might be familiar with this one because you see they had this great battle against Jericho. And they were told, don't grab any of their stuff. This is decided. Jericho is to be exterminated for their idolatry and their disobedience against God. You're going to get their land and don't take anything. Not a thing. And one guy does. And in Joshua 7, verse 25, it said, why did the Lord bring trouble on us? And all Israel stoned this man with stones. And they burned with fire and stoned him with stones. They raised over him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. In other words, there's a monument where Achan and his family died. Apparently his family got involved in the possessions that he took as well. He took gold and silver and some precious garments and so forth. He wasn't supposed to take any of this stuff. And, well, they lost a battle after that to a little town. They defeated big Jericho, but they lost to Ai. And so Joshua says, why did we lose? And God says, well, it's because this guy did this. So find him to be guilty. He confesses, and now stone him. And there's an execution. 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 40 is a very dramatic execution. You remember the big showdown on Mount Carmel between Elijah and the 400 prophets of Baal? Let's see who's real. And for most of a day, the prophets of Baal try to get the sacrifice to be ignited by their God, who is no God. And they're cutting themselves and ranting and raving and crying and all this. And Elijah taunts them, says, what happens? Is your God asleep? And they keep on going. And then finally he says, okay, bring more water. Let's douse this. Douse the wood, douse the altar. Let more water. And then God, basically, vaporized the sacrifice, the wood and the stones and the water. There's nothing but a burnt smudge after God gets done validating that he's God. Then what do? They go out and round up those prophets. In verse 40 it says, Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal and let not one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook and slaughtered them there. This is not a warfare act. It's a civil execution. Now, I don't know how Elijah was able to get all this done. He must have had a lot of help. But nevertheless, he's the one that made sure each one of those 400 prophets got killed. I don't know how fast you can kill people. I mean, just try to put yourself in that position. It's like, wow. How many do you think you could kill? Maybe probably by beheading in like 1 hour.
Well, it says that one can take 1,000.
Okay. I know.
What do you use?
What's that? Depends on what you use. Hopefully a pretty sharp sword of some kind. By the way, when it says they fell to the sword, it always means died. And the sword is always intended to be an instrument of death. It's not just something you rattle and say, hey, you're going to be in trouble. The sword is given for the purpose of executing. And the government has it. Romans 13. He bears not the sword in vain. In other words, he's empowered to take your life. Better pay attention to the civil government God has imposed. So here's Elijah then doing this execution. Another place is in 2 Kings, verse 18. All the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down. Wait a second, I thought they killed off all the prophets of Baal. No, later on they decided to do more Baal worship. By the way, in between, there's a mass execution under King Jehu. He tells his people to gather all the Baal worshipers into a temple, but doesn't tell them why. He acts as if he's going to worship Baal with them. And they all get together in this one building, and he seals the doors. And he tells his soldiers, he said, if you let one of these people out of this building, you're going to die for it.
Or maybe he burned them.
And then they go in and they kill every single one of the Baal worshipers, the priests and everybody. But now this is after that. They're back at it again. And here they're Baal worshiping. So what does it say here? It says, all the people went to the land. It's not up there. Went to the land, to the house of Baal, and tore it down. His altars and his images, they broke it in pieces, and they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. So this is a judicious execution. And then finally, we'll get good King Josiah. And he's still dealing with this problem of idolatrous worship. In verse 20 of chapter 23 in 2 Kings, he sacrificed all the priests of the high places who were there on the altars and burned human bones on them. So we have in our Bible 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 examples here of execution. Now there's an unrighteous execution that takes place in the New Testament. Who's that? Stephen's one of them. Who else? An unrighteous execution, an unjust execution.
Any of the disciples?
Well, that's right. If we have them, I guess John was killed by Herod. John the Baptist was killed. Okay.
Jesus.
There we go. So I chose not to look at New Testament examples of executions because the ones we have depicted here are not justified. And that's the basis for some people who say we shouldn't have capital punishment because there's no record of a just execution in the New Testament. That's what they say. I wonder about the book of Revelation. Is they're forgetting that? Or a lot of people get executed in the book of Revelation. And I wonder about Ananias and Sapphira in chapter 5 of book of Acts. Even though Peter doesn't strike them down, God does. It's still an execution. But we can leave that alone because I gave you 6 examples of Old Testament executions here. All of them happen after Moses says there are rules that you should execute for. But all of them could be justified even without Moses saying there's a death penalty for certain things. Why is that? Why are the sins for which these people were justly executed something that we can defend even without the Mosaic covenant?
Because God said that there will be blood for blood. Like if someone sheds blood by the man, the blood will be shed.
That's right, and that happens before the Mosaic covenant. That's still in place. And this is where I'm loving, well-intentioned, happy to serve God Christians who protest the death penalty. Don't look at their Bible all the way. They should recognize that the command to love can still be kept, and we could still end up having a just government that holds certain people guilty of the death penalty. One doesn't cancel the other one out. But if we get part of the gospel and we act as if what really matters is whether we're loving, and then they define loving, then you're going to see parts of the Bible not being paid attention to at all. Because God isn't just love. He is love. But he's also righteousness and holy and wrath and pure and powerful and all these things. If you had created humans and told them, listen, I made you in my image. And if you kill another image bearer, I'm holding you accountable, and I've authorized other image bearers to take your life. If that's true, and that's what we just read in Genesis chapter 9, then I don't see how we can claim that it's unloving to have executions. We may end up getting into one of these two decisions here. Kinga.
I'm just thinking not to disobey, God's laws, but I'm thinking, what is the ratio of people executed justly and unjustly, like when they were innocent? Because I work for a lawyer who defended a person who was on death row, and they won. I mean, he wasn't executed. And later, when the DNA, because he's retiring, so it's been, at the beginning of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And later, the DNA test was developed,
Mm-hmm.
and it was proven that he was actually innocent.
Mm-hmm. And that's a question.
So I'm not thinking, because in the Old Testament, people lived, they had more open lives. Things were, like it says that at night, in the Leviticus, it says that there is a punishment that someone can kill at night, right? When you are attacked at night, but not during the day.
Not that I'm aware of.
But there was something like this that we read in chapter 20, I think, that there is a difference between being attacked, or self-defense, between
There we go.
being attacked at night
Mm-hmm.
and during the day.
Well, because you might not
During the
know
day,
who it
there
was
would
that
be
killed you.
witnesses.
That would be an intention problem. You wouldn't know for sure
Yeah,
if you
but I
killed
think
him.
like that time, people didn't have like houses, closed houses. Everything was more open, and there would be more witnesses. They were living a life together.
Yeah.
Versus now, you have so many ways to like hide evidence. I don't know. It's just so advanced these days.
Yeah.
Then how does it really? I'm just really afraid of punishing someone who is innocent.
Yeah, and we should be. Now, there's a principle there about let every word be established.
And everything, how police can set up the evidence.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, we should be really
you can go
careful
wrong
about
in
that.
So many different ways,
And that has happened. But there's also been an awful lot of times where a person who really did do the crime got off because of a technicality. Now, good points, Kinga, that you brought up. Scripture says, let every word be established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. So that tells us the death penalty was not to be administered if you didn't have at least 2 witnesses that fully agreed and had been tested to be good. Could they be corrupted? Well, yes, they could be. But the Bible does give a pretty strong reason for justifying the implementation of any penalty, including death penalty. What we've just heard and what we're thinking about here is an objection against the death penalty that is based on improprieties, on corruptions, on distortions. Because people can be distorted, should we ever execute anyone? And that's a consideration that Grudem points out, and he doesn't totally defend that consideration. But if you look on the board here, I put 2 weird words up there. And in philosophy, sometimes we have to find ways to categorize 2 different kinds of things. On the one hand, there's a whatness objection. I object against the death penalty because sometimes it is administered in an inappropriate way, in an unjust way. That objection can be answered if indeed we were more careful about who got executed, that objection would diminish, right? That's a whatness. It's what we do when we execute. Now, we don't behead people any longer here in America, and we never did. And by the way, the 8th Amendment of the Constitution forbids cruel or inhuman punishment. So the French with the guillotine were, doing things, and the English with drawing and quartering, where you would tie a man's arms and hands up in 4 different locations and then say giddy up to the horses attached to them and tear them apart. Or the rack or other things like this where they tortured people. That's not allowed. That's illegal according to our Constitution. So let's say we needed to get rid of the inhuman way of executing, and we sort of have. We used to do hangings. Now, there can be an execution by poisonous gas or by lethal injection. What's that movie, Dead Man Walking, which depicts a man who's guilty of a crime, a really bad crime, and his defense by a nun, and it looks into the challenges, the problems of executions, but also shows that the man was guilty, and he's executed by lethal injection. So we can address the objection, which is a whatness objection. It's what we're doing when we kill someone that's bad. So, okay, let's do it in a more humane way. You see, that's an objection that can be answered by being sure, doubly sure, that the person has been arrested is actually guilty of it. Give them a chance to appeal, let it go through a second court, and so forth. There's some problems with that. It delays the execution, but it helps to keep us from committing an execution that's unjust. You see, I can address a whatness objection by cleaning things up. Another objection that's a whatness objection is, boy, it sure seems like a lot of people of minority status get executed for murders as opposed to those that aren't a minority group. Well, that can be addressed by being sure that everybody who is supposed to be executed, regardless of race, gets the same trial, the same kind of treatment. That's whatness. Grudem's arguments in this chapter focus more on thatness. I think capital punishment in any form is unjust. That the state engages in execution is wrong, wrong, wrong. There's nothing you can do to justify it. That's a position that Grudem is trying to answer here in most of his deliberations. So your concern is duly noted. But that concern has always been here. It's always been the case that somebody could be arrested and unjustly accused, found guilty, and punished of any crime. This is the problem with the objection about, well, wait a second, maybe they didn't really do it. It can undermine any legal judgment. Any legal judgment could have been arrived at unfairly. And God doesn't do that. Even though humans are going to abuse this duty, he still says, by man shall his blood be shed. And that's something we have to come to grips with. And that makes us feel like, boy, government's pretty important. I don't know about you, but I voted in the primary. I voted for a party that probably isn't going to get a lot of people elected, but I don't care. I used my vote to try to influence the way the government's put together, and it gets counted. Even if you're not in a party that's really in the forefront, those votes get counted and encourage the next candidate for your party. So you shouldn't ignore voting in primaries. And they are voted based on your political party. But thank you, that's a very important point. And, I've had people that, I'm not saying this is your position, Kinga, but I've had people who knew about very corrupt police forces. In fact, when we get to talking about war and why there's a war going on in Iran today, it's because 47 years ago, a bunch of religious leaders decided to overthrow the government that was in place, and that government had a secret police, and people got arrested and put in government for protesting, and some of them got executed. The Shah's government was not, squeaky clean. That's part of the reason why they rebelled and created this Islamic government that's causing so much trouble in the world the last 47 years. So, man, it's always been the case that government can be corrupt. And he still says, pray for him. He still says, be subject to government. And he still says, they are authorized to use the sword. Romans 13, 1 Peter 2, and then we go back to Genesis 9. So should any person die for a crime that he or she committed? And here's some things that aren't in your text, but I feel like it's probably important for us to look at is what's our theory of punishment? And there are three. So we'll get to our first theory of punishment, and that's retribution. So government should punish because the people have earned that punishment. So if you're driving your car and you ram into a telephone pole because you're driving at 80 miles an hour and you couldn't control your car and you get fined, what's the basis for the fine? And it is, it's going to cost money to do this, and you deserve it. We've got to make it sting so you don't take the laws lightly in the future. Banks do this. They're not civil government, but banks will charge you for an overdraft. You write a check, you don't have the money in your account. It doesn't happen as much now because people use their credit cards, but back when the only way you could get money out of your bank account for paying things is using checks, you could write checks. And they might not have enough money in the bank account. And if by the time that check hits the bank, there's not enough money there, the bank's going to say, bad. And they're going to charge you. They're going to charge you $35, $50, or whatever. I don't know what overdraft charges are now, but yeah.
And it's really your money that you put in the bank.
Yeah.
They charge you.
And they're going to charge you. Yeah, because they basically are going to honor your check with their money, and you're going to pay for that privilege. That's the deserts theory. You deserve it, therefore you should be punished. How about serving time in jail? You did something wrong and you spend 30 days in jail. That might be something that would happen with a drunken disorderly or something like that. Hey, you need time to dry out. You deserve this punishment. You'll remember not to do this again. That's retribution. To discipline the wrongdoer to the degree of severity that fits the crime. The utilitarian or results theory is we put you in jail to rehabilitate you. And you get a chance to think about what bad thing you did so when you get back out, you don't do it again. And there's a hope there that being punished will result in you considering your ways and changing your ways so that when you get back out again, you won't be as much a danger to society. That's rehabilitation. That's the results theory. And the third one is restitution. In other words, what you did deserves to be compensated to the victim. So you probably heard on the radio, I've been in a wreck, I need a check. Learn and row is the way to go. And they'll give you these legal authorities who can help you get the money for being a victim. And we were victimized. We got hit December 30th, 1990, head on by a drunk driver on Gulf Road between Morton Grove and Skokie. Whenever I drive by there, I kind of, cringe a little bit. We're coming up onto a hill, and it's snowy, and we're driving a normal rate and carefully. And my wife is in the passenger seat. I'm driving. We had this 5-gallon box of Coca-Cola that I was transporting from one restaurant to my restaurant. And as we came to the top of a hill, this other car is way over in our lane coming straight for us. And I didn't have time to stop at all. I just barely saw him, and wham, we got hit. And when the ambulance drivers got there, the first thing they said is, we're going to be pulling some dead bodies out of this. But I thank God that he spared our lives. I went in the hospital, spent time there. Strange thing is they did blood tests and so forth, checked to see, boy, you've got some enzymes in your blood. Now, I don't drink. But they said, how long have you been drinking? I said, I never drink. Something happened because of the impact that jars enzymes out of your liver into your blood that can, make you feel suspect. I don't know whether the other guy was drinking or not. He didn't stay very long in the country. He fled to the other country. He didn't have good insurance. Well, I said all that to say we were victims, obviously. We got hit. There was no way I could avoid it. And so eventually, 6 years later, we got restituted. We got money given to us by a court. 6 years. So it was unjust that we had to wait that long. Plus, the car insurance company raised our rates even though we were not to blame. And that's unjust. But nevertheless, I know what this means to be wanting to be paid back. So that's another one. Now, we have to ask ourselves, restitution, rehabilitation, and retribution, the death penalty can function positively in all three of those situations. And it says in Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 and 6, you need to account. You took a life off the earth, your life then must be taken. The highest penalty. And what more could you do? I suppose if you put them in jail and tortured them for years, that would be worse in terms of suffering, but at least they'd still be alive. This is definitely the worst penalty. And so it's required. That solves the problem of restitution. The retribution would be that a wrong was done to society and we need to make an example, and the death penalty does that. And the rehabilitation theory has some evidence that people who know that they are facing their own execution will consider their ways and come to repentance. And that's the real rehabilitation. If it's certain that you're going to be executed if found guilty for a crime, and you await that execution, your thoughts are going to be focused on, why did I do this? And may I now come to peace with my Maker, with my God. So I'm not saying that justifies all executions. I am saying that each one of the three theories of punishment provides some support for death penalty. Now, here's some arguments for capital punishment. It's not torture. The day of a person's death, now there's torture and waiting for it, but it's not physical torture. And in the past, people were tortured for doing bad things and then killed. And in our country, that's illegal because of the Eighth Amendment.
So what do you guys think about when, because this happens, a gang member who killed people becomes born again?
And that's a good thing that he became born again.
Should he report himself? Because then he's supposed to be
Oh,
executed.
and he hasn't been arrested.
Mhm.
Oh, so you're saying the gang member who killed somebody?
So
Own up to
let's
it
say a
and
gang
it's
member,
responsibility for him.
yeah, but then he gets executed.
And that's, okay, I want to be sure I understand the conditions here.
So, okay, a gang member, right, who killed a lot of people, gets born again.
Mm-hmm. And then he gets
No, he's
arrested.
not caught.
Okay.
But, like, we know that he killed people.
Yeah.
Because of the stories he told.
Uh-huh, okay.
And what do we do?
Well, you should turn him in. I'm glad that he repented. He's broken the law.
But then we know that he should be executed, right?
Yes, yes. And we can't overturn God's command because a man has changed his ways. I think. Now I might be looking at that as too harsh, and I know that Corrie ten Boom met one of the prison guards that oversaw the death of her sister in a concentration camp. She met him, and he became a Christian. And now she has one responsibility, and that is as she meets him and recognizes that he repents, she must forgive him. But having forgiven him doesn't solve the issue of whether he's paid the penalty for his crimes. And I suppose, Kinga, you've got a great question there. It's a difficult one because, gee, he repented. There's evidence that Jeffrey Dahmer, who was a mass murderer,
That's a very nice way of putting it.
repented.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he repented. And then he didn't get killed because he did his crimes in a state that doesn't have the death penalty on purpose.
Oh, wow.
That's why he did it. He said, hey, I can do these things, and if they catch me, the worst will be his life imprisonment. They're never going to kill me for this. Well, he got in prison. He repented, apparently, and as so often happens, there's a rule of law in the prison. They'll pretty much kill off child abusers, child rapists, and the prisoners killed them. That doesn't make it right. I'm not saying if they should have done that, because I think you have to keep the executions under the control of civil government in order for it to not be corrupted, like a gangland hit on a bad gang member, we don't want to do that. That authorizes them as legitimate government. They're not. But yeah, this is a challenge, isn't it? There's a civil crime that has taken place. Man's been lifted from the face of the earth because of my action. I get in prison, or maybe not. Maybe I get right with God and I'm starting to serve the Lord. If they choose to arrest me, I don't have a defense against my own being executed. Now, the court might show mercy, and they could show mercy. But on the face of it, if you shed blood, by a man shall your blood be shed. Now, Jesus said, and when we sing Micah 6:8, he has showed you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love kindness or mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Well, Jesus said all that. And nevertheless, we find that mercy is balanced by God's justice. Let me ask you this. At the great white throne judgment, Revelation chapter 20, will mercy be shown? Not a speck of it. If your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life, then you don't have to stand account for your works at that point. If your name's not, you will answer for every work. And is God being just in doing so? And of course he is. So, I made quick work of a difficult chapter here. Please watch the rest of the slide presentation. Make sure you've done your reading. And when we gather tomorrow, we'll look at the question of war. And because we're engaged in it right now, aren't we? So it's pretty timely. All right.
See you tomorrow.
Yes.